a quick first burst of discussion based on the questions which many of you have been putting and voting on the Menti. So thanks so much for doing that and keep them coming. I'm going to try my best to keep track of them. Some are coming in as comments and things as well, which is fine. I'd encourage you to put comments in the chat, just the main chat on the Teams, and then people can discuss live there as well. It's a bit of a sort of dead end for comments on the Menti potentially. So keep them going in the chat. I'm going to save some of the ones on the Menti for later as well, if they feel like they'd be better for the wider group. So please don't be offended if I haven't picked your highly voted question first. So there's one here about labour, and George, perhaps to start with, will more of the technologies you looked at, and what are the implications for good jobs on the farm? Is it do you have much to say about different technologies and whether they encourage good jobs, make it harder to create good jobs on farms?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think the most obvious technology to look at here is robotics. So I know it applies to other technologies as well, but if we use robotics as the kind of example here and assume we're talking about other technologies as well, automation conventionally has, in the past and in other sectors, has rarely been pointed to a loss in jobs and a reduction in jobs. It's more just a shift of where those jobs are and the type of skills that are involved. With the application of automation and robotics to farming, we do have this situation where we can hopefully bring in a wider spectrum of skill sets into agriculture and encourage an interdisciplinary approach to food production. So whether that's bringing in engineers, people involved in hacking, computer scientists, we create a more exciting and innovative sector that draws jobs into a sector that has traditionally perhaps been slow to adopt many of these innovations that come through. The flip side of that is we do have this shift in which types of jobs are available, and that does need to be considered, and we do need to look at who is trained up, who uses these technologies, who has access to these opportunities that come through. And I think that's a problem that's inherent in any form of technological development, and we do need to make sure maybe disadvantaged communities or certain demographic do have as much access to these opportunities as well, but it's not necessarily a reduction in labour, and I think that's a misunderstanding that's commonly held when it comes to automation. So I'll finish there. I know it's a contentious issue, but yeah, that's my thinking on it.
Thank you. And I guess another thing that perhaps gets missed sometimes is the importance of checking and ground truthing with people doing jobs, whether or not they're good or bad, because I think we tend to make really sweeping assumptions about what a good job and a bad job is. And those, I know I've heard from Landworkers Alliance and others in the past to some real challenge to the assumptions that generally get made about what a kind of good clean job is versus a kind of bad dirty job or whatever. And I think those need to be challenged. Thanks. So another question here about examples from other sectors where they've successfully steered a technology in a more useful direction for society, sort of counter to where the market might have otherwise taken technology. So either of you, have you got thoughts up your sleeve on other examples we can learn from?
I always think, though it's not directly comparable, but that the kind of the massive uptake in renewable energy is a kind of a comparable industry. You look 10 years ago, the amount of energy that we were producing renewably was pitifully low, and now it's at about 55% of our demands, and that was done partly through massive government spending on things like the feed-in tariff, but it was also because it was the thing to develop, improve photovoltaics, improve wind turbines, have floating wind turbines, have ones that were screwed in the floor. And I think we need that same kind of revolution of ideas, probably to drive this kind of agroecological change as well, because it needs to be as exciting and as well funded, so that like 1,000 ideas can bloom.
Okay. Thanks, Joseph. And any quick thoughts, George? I want to squeeze in one more question. So do you have a quick thought on this one?
Sorry, this was comparable tech innovation in sectors.
Well, no, it's where has in a way, where's the intervention of one kind or another steered a technology towards public benefit in a way that wouldn't otherwise have happened if just the market had been left to its own devices.
Okay.
Let's leave it. It's fine. Let's park that one. If you have thoughts on it, pop them in the chat later on. There's a couple of comments I want to flag here, but I won't ask those questions. So one is organics mentioned as agroecology in practice. Should government be supporting organic as part of the environmental land management scheme? I'll sort of take that as a yes, probably anyway. Certainly from Joseph, because I think the Soil Association says lots about that already, and it feels sort of broader issue than this discussion here. And then I think there's some useful comments on and sort of critical comments around gene editing as well, which are in the Menti, and I think do feel free to discuss that further in the chat, on the meeting chat as well. But the last one before we move on to the next phase is, were there any generic sort of cross-cutting points about how to make sure that that the technologies you looked at benefited local communities rather than concentrating profits in the hands of technology operators? And so in a way, that's about that the horizontal axis on your scenarios grid. So George, just a quick comment on that, please.
Yeah, there's a variety of things, and I think it depends whether we're looking at access to food from a consumer perspective or access to the technologies from a production perspective. And many of these recommendations really came down to the ability to customize and tweak those technologies and have them fit into the system that a farmer is maintaining. So if technologies are interoperable, if they can take parts from one area technology and put them into another and make that technology flexible to those systems, then that enables that access. But also, if the supply chains don't, the real key one here was dynamic procurement, and if these supply chains don't force farmers to scale, and scaling isn't inherently bad, but if it's done at the cost of environmentally sustainable practices and forces intensification and simplification, then you have these negatives and also trap farmers into a certain form of production and only enable large scale farmers to access these supply chains. Whereas dynamic procurement and the use of this information technology allows access on a far more equal and fair level, where farmers don't have to adapt their systems to meet the market. Where I think traditionally markets have been dominated by actors that are above farmers, and they've controlled that market, and it's restricted the flexibility of producers. This turns that on its head and allows farmers to remain flexible and provide into that. So I think that was a key one, really, and then interoperability, repair, and into and modularity.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, George, and thanks again, Joseph, as well.